Welcome back to the Win with Dice podcast, a podcast featuring members of the Win with Dice team. I'm Calvin, and I'm joined here by Ramon.
Hey guys, this is your first time listening to the Win with Dice podcast. This is a podcast all about tabletop RPGs. Calvin and I like to talk about the games we play in, the games that we run, just our experience in the hobby. So you can feel like if you're first time ever hearing about this Dungeons and Dragons tabletop RPG nonsense, you can play the game in the hobby and jump behind the GM screen if you're already part of the hobby.
Yeah, we take a casual approach to games, so hopefully it makes the other side of the screen look a little less mysterious. This week, we wanted to get into talking about Grand Saga, the tabletop RPG that Ramon has been working on. That's in an alpha playtest state right now and will be linked below if you want to check it out. If you have any questions or comments on it, you can leave those on the video below, or you can reach us through our website, which is winwithdice.ca, where we've got like a question box thing you can submit stuff to.
Yeah, and those will be directed to me, and I'll answer any of your questions.
Exactly. But before we get into, we wanted to get into just some updates with regards to the system and maybe a couple of classes. But before we get to all that fun stuff, we have to get to the most important part of the show, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week.
Yes, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week, brought to you by Ramon. So this one's about, for the GM specifically, but it's about like the ideas that are presented in like your monster manual. There's all these different types of monsters like angels and like demons and devils and dragons and like goblins and these very specific things. Those are holdover from like when Gygax was, like scrubbing every piece of mythology to fill up the first monster manual ever, right? So, things that are like that were used what's the word, colloquially, like just like locally or whatever, right? For like a goblin is another word for like a fae, which is another word for like a demon or like an evil thing, right? So, but because he needed to fill it out with all these different entries, right? He had to separate those things out that really just meant the exact same thing, right? But I challenged like the notion that like, a dragon or a demon to one in the context of like one, I guess, religion or mythology could mean something totally different in another one. So don't be afraid to just have your players or have your NPCs in your world reference the different things as the same thing, because to them an evil spirit's an evil spirit, right? It needs to be exorcised. A ghost's a ghost. It doesn't actually matter if it's a banshee or like an actual ghost or a poltergeist or any of this other stuff, right? Or like, a demon and devils. Nobody knows really the nuances. These people are just living their lives, and it makes the illusion of like a real world and less of like a video game, I should say.
Yeah,
right?
That makes sense. I feel like, those manuals or what's it called for Pathfinder? The bestiaries or the Alien Archive or whatever game you're playing in. Like, if they have information on creatures you might encounter, I think a lot of that could be high-level information that specified adventurers would know and that GMs could communicate, but someone who doesn't have that specific adventurer experience might not know the differences between, I don't know, like a banshee and a revenant.
Yeah, and it actually would be, I think it's even better for players too, because, if you tell them, oh, this is a demon, you just say it's like an evil spirit or like some evil entity, it kind of brings the mystery back to it, because you don't know exactly how to deal with it, and maybe they can go on researching about it and like bring these these especially like those outsider entities like demons and devils and angels and even the fae creatures. They all should have like be like kind of unique and kind of have like their own names and stuff like that, right? To kind of make it be like a little more folk tale, a little bit more
like
mythical and fairy tale like, right?
Yeah.
Like the local goblin chief should have a name, and he should have like the townsfolk be like, oh, it's this person, or like the local, like even if it's just like a low level fae thing, because it matters to these people, they should have like say in like what they call it, right? Which the players, it would also like make the players be like, I don't know what I'm going into, so maybe I'll do some research, maybe I'll prepare a little bit, but there's like a little bit of uncertainty, right, of what you're dealing with.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that idea. Like it gives more value to stopping and researching your, like, what you're dealing with, the problem that you're currently dealing with as a player, instead of just like what's going on, so you already know what to do about it. Like you have to take time to figure that out.
Yeah, and even like I think as a GM, you can have stuff have a little leeway. Like if a player's spell specifically says demon, maybe in your game it'll make it unique to being like, yeah, instead of it being like demon specific, it's like evil spirit specific, right? Like that kind of subcategory of not from this plane but also evil kind of deal, right? Which will make that whatever the player's using way more useful, like so yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go, folks. There's your tip of the week. Just be a little bit more flexible, be a little more parochial, make these evil spirits and goblins, and just be a little bit less specific and a little bit more I'm a poor farmer. I need help, please. There's demons in my bed.
Exactly. All right, well, let's get into the episode. So recently you made some updates to the current Grand Saga playtest.
Yes, I made a couple updates. So I wanted to kind of share with the podcast audience. And also Calvin, because apparently I just don't talk to him about this stuff until we're recording.
Which is fine, because then we can, talk to the audience as well.
It's true, get some audience buy-in. Yeah, okay, so I actually had every time I make a change, it's like an existential crisis, because I'm like, oh my god, I ruined my game. In the middle of the night, wake up with sweats. But I made some changes to the actual damage and like damage reduction and like the way the language all kind of works, because I wanted to like bring in another like aspect where it's like, what does it mean to like reduce damage, right? What does it mean to have like resistance? And I didn't quite like the idea that you just kind of half damage, as well as like the idea of like being vulnerable, right? Or like doubling damage. So, I mean, I kind of did the exact same thing, but we ran into some issues where, the armor, I guess, mechanic, or armor and ward mechanic, that like, you wear armor, it absorbs some of the damage you're taking. The way it used to work was like, the armor would just absorb, like, if you get hit once, it doesn't matter what the amount is, unless it has shred on it, it just takes off 1 damage. A 1 armor, or he reduces it by 1. So it's like, the idea is just like, you instead of simplifying to be like, oh, this is a big hit, the armor absorbs like taps of hits instead of like big damage hits, which I mean, if you it kind of favors smaller damage and more attacks versus like a big attack. It makes big attacks don't feel that good. If you're like throwing out like heavy and super damage, and all it takes for somebody to stop it was just like a light piece of armor, then it won't feel as good. Okay. So yeah. I was like, I think I had to change that. So now armor gets reduced or gets removed based on the amount of damage that's being done. But specifically, I've changed like light, heavy, and super into something called standard damage. And it's really just kind of based off of your standard damage. That's how your armor works. So if you get hit with light damage, it's 1 armor or ward gets removed. Heavy, it's 2, and super, it's 3. So now, if you have like +3 armor, that means you can tank like a super move or 3 light moves. And I also changed the light damage, instead of it being 9, now it's 12 damage. So you really, really don't want to get hit by that.
Do you mean like the super damage is 12?
Yeah, super damage is 12 damage, which is like, I think it can take out. I mean, obviously, if you get hit straight up, then it's like you're eating the dirt. But it's okay, you're heroes. You guys will be fine.
You too.
Yeah, but additionally, now that when you critically succeed on like a hit with an attack that does damage, you change the standard damage up by 1 category. So if you're doing light damage before, you're doing heavy damage. If you're doing
and then heavy to super, right?
Heavy to super, yes. And this also, there's a bunch of rules or abilities and items that do something else by how much damage you're doing, right? So on a critical hit, Now, I think before, when you had like a heavyweight weapon, if you would critically hit with a light damage, you would double that damage, so it would be 3, so it would be 6, right? It would essentially be heavy damage, but because the language didn't translate to the weapon, you wouldn't actually be getting the heavy damage effect on the heavyweight weapon, which means the heavyweight weapon scales by the amount of standard damage you do. So like light does 1 knockback, heavy does 2, super does 3, that kind of thing.
Okay, so you have things that are different effects depending on if you do light damage or if you do heavy damage, but your light damage critical damage is the same as regular heavy damage.
Yes.
So you're essentially compensating for that by saying just move up 1 step, so that if you have something that has an effect for heavy damage and you're doing something equal to what would normally be heavy damage, you just get that effect.
Yes. You also get the heavy so let's say if you have an attack, right? Like so the glaive specifically calls out some abilities that says when you do like heavy damage, right? Mm-hmm. Now that stuff triggers off of a crit with a light damage weapon because you hit somebody so hard.
Okay.
So you can pull off some stuff if you land a crit, as well as like all of the stuff that happens when you have a critical hit. Additionally, so now bonus damage is defined as just X damage, but now it's multiplied by 2 when you critically hit somebody. So that's taken care of. And now reliable damage doesn't have a modifier to it. So now it only can do 1 damage. But regardless, if you use an attack that does reliable damage, it will do that damage to that person. But armor now inherently ignores bonus damage and reliable damage because armor only cares about what standard damage you're actually taking.
So does the bonus and reliable damage still take effect when you're wearing armor?
Yeah, so any effects do still take because you are technically being hit. Like, if you're being hit by something and lights you on fire, then no matter what armor you have, you're going to still be on fire.
Fair enough.
Right? Unless you're a robot. Robots are immune to being on fire if they still have armor because, I don't know. I said so. Yeah, Kyle, what are your thoughts? I mean, I like the armor system to be like effective, but also like you can still get around it. Like you can't just have like a whole bunch of armor. You still like if you have multiple ways of getting through like somebody else's armor. Either you hit him with a bunch of light damage or you hit him with a big super attack or whatever.
I was wondering if the armors do like anything else. Like if you have like a super armor, does that, or not a super armor, just like if you have heavier armors, do those also have another effect? Like do they reduce your speed or anything like that?
Yeah, they do. So actually, that because of the armor changes, I had to redo the armor options, like the accessory options, which I had to. So now there's battle armor, which is like the highest level of armor. So armor now gives this armor gives like +3 ward and +3 armor. And while you're equipped with it, your ground is you can't fly and you can't use the sprint action. So you're just slower than everybody else, but you have you have protection. You have +3 protection from both types of damage, like physical and magical damage.
Right.
Versus like lower armors, like the tactical vests, you get +2 armor, but you get an extra consumable slot. And there's like variations of like, trade-offs between how much protection you get and like what you can't do.
Okay. And then just so I'm double checking, just so I'm understanding and make sure the audience understands. So if you are wearing that 3 armor and you take light damage, you reduce that damage by 1, and then you take that value off of your armor.
Yeah. So let's say you get hit with a complex attack with a bunch of stacking buffs, right? Mm-hmm. So you're taking light damage plus like 3 bonus damage plus like 1 reliable damage, right? If you have armor, you only care about the light damage, so all of that gets absorbed into the light damage. But if you don't have armor, then you're taking like all of that to the face.
Yeah.
So, so it's like even if you have one piece of one armor on, you don't have to worry about like, the plink damage from reliable damage, or like your opponent can boost their bonus damage as much as they want, but because you have the armor, you can absorb that hit.
Right, yeah, because you're immune to the bonus and reliable damage.
Yeah. So it like gives more emphasis around armor, but it makes armor like stronger, but it also gives those moves that it rushes the moves where it's like if you're doing super damage to something, it should feel like you're blowing through somebody, right? Like you should be like that heavy amount of damage should be rewarding and worth trying to go for.
Right. So that damage is reduced by 3. It's applied to like the 3 or whatever on your armor, and the roll over, anything left over applies to your whatever particular type of damage they're doing.
Yeah, so but also there's a clause. So if you have, let's say you get hit with super damage and you only have 2 layers of armor left, then that super damage will just blow through the 2 layers of armor and then hit you for full damage and you lose your armor. So it's kind of like, eventually something's gonna crack, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the cracking point is like when you hit like negative armor essentially, then like you've blown past someone's armor, so they take the full damage.
Right, and then the armor is like broken at that point, right? You have to repair it.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then that's like a downtime activity.
Yeah, that's a downtime activity. Or like, if there's a rest or something like that, or like you take a break or your GM allows it, then you can like, if you're carrying an extra set of armor, then you could technically just switch it out and put on your new pair of armored pants or whatever you have.
True.
Yeah. So yeah, that actually opened up a little bit more nuance into the game, I think, because now it like I also had to like tone down Shred, because Shred, like something like Shred 3 can eat, that's like a lot of armor to eat through. It was going to take super damage, right? So then, I toned down a lot of Shred in the game, and I also switched a lot of reliable damage. My reliable damage used to be like all over the place, but now it's like it's lessened and being replaced with like bonus damage, anything that kind of scales. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, and additionally, so since crits were being changed, I also had to change stuff like resistances. So when something says they're resistant to something, what it means is it reduces the standard damage by 1 stage, and it also halves any other damage that you're taking. And if the damage is below 1, it just becomes 0, right? So if you do 1 bonus damage, it gets rounded down to half. And if you do light damage, it gets to 1 damage and it gets ignored essentially. So if you have resistance to something, it's like pretty big.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's like even if if someone like critted you with like a heavy attack and you have resistance against it, it would just go back down to being like a heavy attack essentially. And now as well, like the vulnerable condition, now that just means any hit that hits you, you just it causes a critical hit.
So it just moves up 1 step.
Yeah, but it means even more. It means that if someone is vulnerable, that means that any successful hit triggers any critical hit effects or critical failure effects in case of like enemies targeting.
Oh yeah. Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah, so things can just start to
like stack up if you're made vulnerable to something.
Yeah, and like you could really explode somebody.
Okay, and then that takes into like different damage types and everything. Like if you're vulnerable to a certain damage type.
Yes.
Okay, I see.
But yeah, which makes I think resistances kind of cool, because you can start playing around with that kind of stuff, or at least for the GM. I think that a lot of monsters have a lot of resistances, so having like players really branch out in what they are capable of doing can really help out. It makes the party feel like there's like so many layers. So like one person might be like an enemy might be resistant to physical damage while they have armor, or resistant to magical damage while they have armor. So it's like, do you destroy their armor so you can hit the magic attacks, or do you just try and power through with your powerful magic attacks? It just kind of opens up a little bit more variation in gameplay, and it just kind of keeps the players like, you could throw a curveball to your players who are just so used to doing the same thing over and over again.
Right, because they go through different like either they go through like a direct route, or they just have different stages of their dealing with their enemy, where they're trying to deal with the armor first and then doing damage on the actual enemy itself.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I can see. Yeah. So I'm just trying to figure out like the broader like gameplay implications about like what the new options it gives you as both the person running the game and as someone who's playing in the game, and then sort of like what equipment you want to use, and then so how easy is it for someone to change up the types of damage that they do? Like what we were talking about with the tip, like trying to understand different like seeing different creatures in different ways, and then putting more importance on like actually doing research on these things. Like if players do that in a game, what sort of options do they have to change up their damage types? Like is that something that would fall under some items or something, or research they can do in downtime?
Yeah, so there isn't like a rule in there yet, but I will probably put it in where you're like, for instance, everyone gets like a standard attack, which is like whack, zap, or shoot or something like that. Mm-hmm. That's either going to be transferred, like you can carry like an extra like sidearm or a weapon or something that gives you access to like whack or zap if you already chose something else, or during your downtime you can just choose to change out whack for like zap or something like that, as well as like while you're choosing your in character creation specifically, it makes you think about alternative ways of doing damage, right? Like maybe it makes you either think like to specialize. Instead of specializing, you could also like plug those gaps with some other abilities. Instead of going down like one tree, you choose to like, okay, well if that's the case, then I'm gonna go ahead and take up a level of arcanist, or like maybe in this fight we're really just gonna focus on supporting our mage because the mage is the thing that's gonna do the most damage because of this creature, right? So and like items too, as well as like just kind of focusing on abilities as well, right? There's nothing in the game that's like really immune to all types of damages, so it's too immune that it's not gonna, like, you can't find a way out to solve a problem. But it's that's just kind of like it. There's always kind of even though if something's like resistant to something, or like there's not a lot of stuff that's straight up like immune to something.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Like I like the different options that this current setup for armor and ward gives.
Yeah, and now you're also letting me think that maybe I should put an item that lets you change your type of damage.
No, I was just throwing it out there because, like, you have resistance, so I think that would make great use of that mechanic by letting players, like, giving them options. But that depends on, like, how you want damage types to work. Like, if you're just simplifying them down to, like, magic and ranged and physical, or if you want to have, like, this is fire, or, I don't know, piercing or punch damage.
Yeah, totally. And like it makes like maybe instead of like I have to raw damage at somebody, maybe you actually just throw a bunch of status effects on a thing, right? And like poison and burn, they don't care about your armor or reward or your resistances. They're just gonna do the damage to you, right?
Yeah, because
they're like they're not like an attack or anything like that, so they just do straight up damage to you, or your enemy or whatever. Or even if it's like the rune blade, I forgot to change the name of that one. So the rune blade allows you to change your magic attacks to both be your physical attacks to be like both magical and physical attacks, right? Mm-hmm. Add special properties to it, and then like even they even have an ability that says like you can apply magical, like your rune magic onto your allies' attacks, right? So now it's like you have to coordinate with your allies on like, okay, so I'm here doing stuff, but also like I'm here to support you as well. And like a lot of classes, they also have access to multiple types of damage. Not every class, but a lot of classes can access like some sort of magic damage or some sort of or physical damage if they're a magic class or something like that. And like I'd be pretty surprised if a whole party chooses to do one type of damage. That'd be pretty. I'll be surprised.
Just because there's so many options.
Yeah, and it's like even it doesn't really happen too much in regular games, like even in all of our Pathfinder games, right? Everybody chooses to do something different.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just gives opportunity for some people to shine, and or give everyone time to shine when it's necessary, right?
I feel like communication before the game kind of helps with that in a way, because knowing what other people are doing, sometimes you want to try something different because you don't want to have like the exact same character as someone else, or you just want to try a new class or whatever. Mm-hmm. And like knowing what will fill a gap gives you that excuse. So
yeah, of course. And like even if it doesn't, then that's just like a challenge you have to figure out. that's like, if the GM says like, I remember failure in my game doesn't mean the end of the story. It just means you got to go lick your wounds and figure something else out.
Right.
So yeah. That was like the change. That was like pretty the major changes. And I think for the last kind of updates, I think I made some small character changes to some of the classes. But
are there any of the classes we've talked about already, or is it some that we might get to later then? Because I did want to squeeze a couple in here before we finish the episode. But if we've talked about anything from Acrobat to Bruiser, I don't know if you've updated yet.
I did make some changes to the Bruiser that kind of aligned some of the changes with the combo system. Yeah, just to kind of clean up the language with the Bruiser to make the like the left hook, right hook, jab kind of combo kind of makes sense. So instead of left hook, it just says double any forceful movement on the extender ability. I'm not sure if we should go over combos again for if anyone's listening.
Yeah, we can touch them real quick just because it's been a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so in Grand Saga, some abilities are called combos. So they have like an opener text, an extender text, or a finisher text. And basically it's like you don't have to use them in a row, but you have to use one of them every turn, and they kind of just like build on each other. So like an opener is usually kind of small, but it gives you a little bit of bonus, while like a finisher is kind of big blowout, kind of super move finish.
Yeah. But you just have to use them in that order. Like you have to use an opener, then a finisher, or an opener, extender, and finisher.
Yeah. That's you have to use it exactly how Calvin said it. So,
but like not necessarily on the same turn.
Yeah, not necessarily on the same turn, but you can always just use an opener. So it's like you only use an extender after an opener, and you only use a finisher after an opener or an extender.
Right.
That kind of.
It's also like can you do a different kind of action if you've done one already? I don't recall the specifics on that. Like, do you have to do them like if you do an opener, or do you have to do an extender or finisher next, or can you do something different?
No, you can do anything you want as long as specifically you can use an extender on your next turn if you use an opener on your previous turn. It's just that like if you for some reason were knocked out, or like you just couldn't, then the combo stops. So
okay, so the combo only stops on a knockout, or is like a turn, or
yeah, if you just did not use an extender like on your turn or a previous turn, you can't use a finisher. If you didn't use an opener on your turn or before or the turn before, then you can't use an extender. You just have to have used one of those actions previously.
Okay, so like the time limit is like your previous turn.
Exactly.
Or your next turn, rather, as the counter would go onto your next turn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying you updated the combos on the Bruiser.
Yeah, I just updated the combos on the Bruiser to make it a little bit better. So, the left hook thing where it's the extender, the next finisher combo you use doubles any forceful movement applied to the attack. So now, instead of specifically being knockback, if you do launch, then you can do that, or if you do like any other forceful movement like shift, then it's actually just doubled if you wanted to.
Nice. So again, like you're giving yourself some control over the positioning of your enemies, because you could just knock them back pretty far if you set up your moves correctly.
Yeah, and you can be that one-man wrecking machine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, we covered the Bruiser a couple episodes ago. I think that was on our last Grand Saga episode.
Yes. We were very excited. We were very excited to talk about the Bruiser.
Yeah.
So, maybe we got some time, so maybe I could go over a class.
Yeah, let's get into the Canoneer, and then we'll see how many classes we get to today. But we can at least cover the Canoneer.
Yes, so the Canoneer, you have a large cannon and you know how to use it. I guess that's kind of an innuendo. I just didn't realize that.
I wasn't thinking that, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, you saturate the battlefield with explosions and shrapnel. So what it says on the tin, you have a big cannon and your core ability is called Shell. So it's an agility attack. It's basic. It's quite a long range. It's range 10. It's physical. It's arcing, so it goes over cover and line of sight and stuff like that. And it's blast 1, so it's like an area of effect. So this thing also has you get +1 difficulty on this attack unless you use the brace action on your previous action previously this turn, and it does light damage and it also does reliable damage. Because it's such a big explosion, it's kind of hard for you not to hurt somebody, right? Even on a miss, right? So that's the Canoneer's whole shtick. It's really just kind of shooting big blast attacks. And, all of its abilities either help it do that or just, dump stuff downrange. Definitely it is the artillery class.
Like if you're walking around with like a rocket launcher or just a big old gun strapped to your back or something.
Yeah, essentially. It's actually pretty dope. Although not a lot of people has used it. Some people have to great effect, and in lots of different ways actually. Because I think you used the Canoneer ability, right? In one playtest we did, which was
I think so, but it was a while ago. I think it might have been one of the first or second characters I ever made because it's been a while since I used it.
Yeah, I think it was like a Canoneer and a biker. I remember the first time I introduced the Canoneer, I ever playtest, I think somebody used the Canoneer and the Shinobi, which is like the ninja class, which and the sniper class at the same time, which I thought was kind of wild.
Interesting combo.
I did not expect it. So, but hey,
I remember a lot of bracing, so that might have been Canoneer stuff.
Yeah, so the cannon's so big, it's unwieldy. You have to use brace. Brace means like you're bracing for impact or you shooting it, and brace means you're bracing to take damage as well, right? So that kind of you gotta hunker down. So it's yeah, there's only really actually one aspect that kind of helps with bracing, which is entrench, which is a stance. So you gain immobilize, so you you can't move, and you gain cover, and you count as being in cover, as well as the brace action costs -1 action to perform. So basically, it's for free, which ties really well if you actually want to play like a Bastion. Bastion Canoneer, so you have like a big shield and a big gun, and you kind of just plant your little fortress on the ground, and you're like, all right,
this is my fort.
I'm not moving. Yeah, this is my area, okay. So which is pretty cool. So if you have a shield, you can, when you use the brace action, you get an extra die on the save roll, as well as you're already in cover. So because you count as being in cover, anything that gives you bonuses for being in cover also activates. You just can't be moved. You just can't move. you're hunkering down.
Yeah, and that's a stance that you can only have. Were stances that you can only have one of them loaded at a time, or can you have multiple stances at a time?
So yes, but there is an ability on another class that says you can have 2 stances up. I believe it's on the Warriors class. It's called Freestyle. So I think you spend your reaction on your turn to activate another stance. So instead of on your turn, stances are free, but you only get 1 of it at the start of your turn. But now you can use a reaction to, when you gain a stance, to actually activate another stance. So you could have 2 stances up if you wanted to.
Right.
Which is pretty cool. You're freestyle. But yeah, now we have a bunch of arts. I'm gonna go over the arts. Arts are like modifiers you apply to your attacks that, you change the way you say it, adds a bonus effect, and it usually changes the attack costs more action, so it turns it from like a basic attack to a special attack, or a special to a super, or maybe cost some sort of resource or something like that. That's kind of like generally how arts work. It's kind of like your martial arts, but this is your gun stuff. So you have an arts called Barrage. So increases the attack level by 1. So you go from basic to special and special to super. And you use so all of the arts actually just they go the full range. So you use 2 areas for this attack instead of and they cannot overlap. So it's kind of like you fire off twice. That's kind of the art. So if you for 1 extra action, you get to shoot 2 shells instead of 1 shell. And these are for like this is for any basic range area attack. So even if you wanted to cast like a area of effect spell, you can use 2 areas. And they don't have to be blasts. They can be like lines, they could be slashes, they can be whatever, as long as they just don't overlap and you did it.
Yeah, because you have to have just 2 different areas. Okay, I see.
Yeah, kind of like a barrage. The other is blinding. That one's self-explanatory. You shoot like an incendiary or a blinding shell, so you blind everybody there. And blind's a pretty cool ability. I think I changed it as well. So now the blind status. If I ever went through all the statuses, which I don't remember if I have on the
I don't think we have on the channel now.
No, but blind is pretty cool. So blind, you treat all targets as benefiting from cover. So on top of you if you're blinded, you trying to hit somebody, they automatically count as being in cover, so they get like an extra die on the defense. As well as if the targets are already benefiting from cover, they count as having the invisible condition. And the invisible condition basically means that on any rolls that are even, you automatically fail. So it just gives you baked in the 50% chance. I always didn't like how you had to roll a 50% chance after you hit somebody that's like invisible. Just like felt like it was like wasting time. So I just built in to be like, if it's even, it doesn't matter if you're within your range or not, you just automatically miss.
Oh, you're just combining that 50% check.
Yes, just straight into the 1 die roll.
Okay, because like from like, I know it's in Pathfinder. I think Lancer does like a 50% thing as well.
Yeah. Which I mean, it's I think that's good. I mean, you could still crit. So if you roll a 1, you could still crit. But if you had like a critical chance that it's like increases it to 2, then you better roll that 1 or whatever. So yeah. So being blinded is bad. You'll miss way more.
Yeah.
So the Canoneer. So yeah, then there's Demolisher. Which means that any objects, cover, or terrain size 1 or 2 in the area, it is destroyed and just turned into difficult terrain. This is your Demolisher shot. This is where you're building your bunker buster attack. And then there's Flak, which is pretty cool actually. So you gain +1 accuracy versus airborne targets, and non-airborne targets are immune to this attack. So you could actually, if there's a flying enemy, you could just target them, and all of your friends that are on the ground can just chill out and not have to worry about friendly fire.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because you're doing an area effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like again, like this is one of those things that like you're spending like getting an ability for this. But it's also very specific, but it's also very like effective in that specific situation.
Yeah, there's a lot of options to get flying enemies, so I feel like it'll be useful because flying enemies inherently get like a bonus versus like it's more harder to hit them with like melee attacks, for instance. As well as like flying enemies ignore terrain, they could just do whatever they want. So really, it's like if you were fighting a flying enemy, they're gonna be all up in your face, and they just don't care about what your little ground folk are doing until the man with the big gun shows up.
Exactly.
And then, poof, out of the air.
Yeah, everyone gets a chance to shine.
Yeah. Oh, so.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Calvin. I didn't want to stop you. What were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say we could cover another class, but I was wondering if you could get into some of the enemy stuff, just like for something very short, just like a preview of that, because we've talked about enemies, but we haven't really gone into like how they work. I was wondering if you want to spend like just a couple of minutes on that before we finish the episode, instead of trying to like rush through a class.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to mention one more thing about the Canoneer. They have an ability called Potion Grenade. So it's a technique, and it's like the same kind of arrow effect as Shell. But you load up a potion flask and you shoot it at your allies, and it basically counts as a use action. So you can just have like an area effect range 10 use of a potion, which you can dump on your allies to, heal them up, give them a boost, add like, give them armor or whatever if you have the alchemist. So I think that's also one of the coolest parts.
Yeah, I was looking at that one. Definitely.
Yeah, that one's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so NPCs. Kellen wants NPCs. We're gonna give him NPCs.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So all of the NPCs' actions, like attacks and stuff like that, Grand Saga, the players do all of the rolling. So the GM just has to decide what action is going to happen. They don't have to worry about the outcome. The players have to worry about the outcome. So they're called attack saves. They're called saving rolls. And every NPC also has another action called charge up, which is different from the players. Charge up is kind of like focus and brace put together. It's just kind of the enemies just, charging up their abilities to do something else, or use like a more powerful attack. As well as like they have a move action, which is based on what type of enemy they are, and they can use one or two actions, and based on it you move one or two. It's kind of mimicking like dash and sprint, but basically it's like it's a little bit simpler for the GM, so they don't have to use the exact same terms.
Right.
Yeah. And there's like a couple of I'll go into it if we go into the template. So like basically the way that like NPCs are set up, it's a little bit like Lancer, where you kind of choose like an archetype and then you can add like stuff on top of it. So in Grand Saga you choose a base and you add templates on top of it. So bases are like your idea of what your thing is. So like if your NPC is a guy, then he'd be a humanoid. If your NPC is a wolf, then it would be a beast, and if it's like a fire elemental, then it's an elemental, that kind of deal. And basically the bases give you a couple of options to choose from to make your NPC unique, and then you add stuff on top of it with the templates, which are more like, is your human a sword fighter, is your beast a flying monster or a slime, or is your elemental a machine, right? Like maybe the core is like a fire elemental and it's actually just powering a giant robot that punches you in the face, which has all the strengths of a robot and fire.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and there's another level. So there's major. So that they're called minor enemies when you add a template on top of it. Major enemies when you add two templates on top of it. And templates add like HP and armor and like movement. So every time you make a combination is actually going to be different for everything. Like everything is like, again, kind of emulating from the players. All of the NPCs, you could just create something super unique and super specific that you want to do. As well as like every template gives you another subset of options that you can choose to add on to make your NPC even further unique. And because everything's a little bit kind of generic, you can spin it whichever way you want. So, even though two humanoid swordsmen exist, one could be like, have one special ability that makes it different from the other one, for instance.
Right, so they have like optional abilities as well that you can use.
Yeah. So should we like go through one? I think I made an example here.
Yeah, we can go through one. We can go through an example or just like a base thing, or like a base template if you want to. Yeah.
Okay. So I have the fire pheasant, which is a standard. This would be a standard, but it's a kind of like your generic kind of equal to one player kind of enemy. So it's a minor enemy. It's a beast and it's a pyromancer. So beast is the base and pyromancer is from the sorcerer template, and it's a fire magic person, right?
Right.
So in the beast base, you have an ability called local wildlife. You ignore all terrain except for those created by foes, because if you're an animal that lives in the environment, you just know how to work it, right? It's your domain, right? At the start of combat, you choose, I mean, it's supposed to be at the start of combat, but basically at the start of creation, you choose whether it has wings, so it gains airborne. It's a climber, so it ignores all movement penalties while climbing, and you can cling to surfaces because, you know, you're like or swift, which means you get +2 movement if you just like move in a straight line. So if you just, because, you know, and I also added another one here. It's not here. I haven't updated this example yet, where it's like burrower. Yeah. Call me Scooby. So you get to, when you move, you just ignore everything because you're moving underground, and if whatever you're trying to get to is on a different like height level, as long as it's connected to the ground, you ignore that movement or that elevation. Just go to the spot because you're like digging through the earth, essentially. Yeah. Okay.
And then you add the pyromancer template on top of that to make a creature that uses fire.
Yes. So the pyromancer so every template it's set up with 3 abilities that's on the template, as well as like 3 abilities from the group and 3 abilities from the actual template. But you only get access to those abilities per arc. An arc is kind of determined by the level of the party. So if everybody in the party is like levels 1 to 4, I believe I set that up to be, or 4 to 3. I have to double check. Or sorry, 1 to 3. It's within like the first arc of your story, and then arc number 2 is like levels 4 to whatever, like 7, and then it's like, or like 7 to 10 is like the third arc of the story. So as the game progresses, even though you choose to use a pyromancer, it gets more abilities, and the actual like numbers themselves don't really change because like everyone's HP and armor and stuff stays the same, but the amount of abilities and complexity of the fight gets more. So it's like the players have to deal with just more nonsense essentially thrown at them. And the arc 1 ability for sorcerer is mana boost. So when you use the charge action onto an attack, you can also apply it gains overwhelm 1/2/3, which is like based on like the amount of like standard damage they do, light, heavy, or super on the damage being dealt. And what overwhelm means is that even if somebody saves, they actually reduce their ability score by that amount. So if someone has a 8 spirit, they use a spirit attack, they pass, they actually, and it does like heavy damage, they reduce their spirit by 2. So now the next time they make that roll, it's at 6. So it's pretty,
So is it like essentially like reliable damage for an ability score then?
Kind of. It's like, it doesn't apply if you fail the roll, but if it's like the attack is so overwhelming that it took so much out of you to just defend yourself.
Right. So do you lose that, you use that bar whether you succeed or fail? Or you lose that point whether you succeed or fail, rather?
Only when you succeed.
Oh, so if you, like, what happens if you fail then? Like, does it not also apply, or?
No, you just get hit in the face with the damage. Yeah, so it doesn't apply if you fail, because it's not meant to penalize players with low scores to make them fail even worse. It's to make players with high scores feel the pressure.
Oh, okay. I don't know. It sounds like it might be better just to fail that, or.
I mean, I feel like you'd be in a death spiral.
Well, because I mean, like, if you succeed, you lose the point, but if you fail, you might lose health on the thing, but you might not roll over to lose the entire point on your ability score, unless I'm not understanding how overwhelm works.
Yeah, so it's like, so you can't really go, your ability scores can't go past lower than 1. It's just, if you're at 1, then you're at 1, right?
Yeah.
So, and the idea is overwhelm specifically is for lowering attacks lowering the efficacy of a high ability score. It's because like, you know, again, it's like if you're actually able to defend against this thing reliably, it's gonna start chipping away at your ability to do that. It's like, and it's also it's so hard on you to try and resist it that, like, you know, even though you managed to stop the damage against it, it's like the stress of you trying to do that makes it harder for you to, you know, use that ability score.
Okay. No, like I think I get that as just that it's, I don't know, it seemed, maybe I wasn't understanding, like, because it seems like you lose that point if you lose enough HP, right?
No. Or
is that not, or am I thinking of something different?
I think you're thinking of something different.
Okay, then that's fine. I thought this was so, like, for your might, agility, your spirit, like if you take enough damage in one certain aspect.
Oh, right. So that actually is another change. Thank you for bringing that up, Cup. And I actually completely forgot about that.
Okay. That's what it was.
You know, I really need like a change document because this is like super alpha. I'm like, I'm like, everything is the Wild West around here. Everything's changing so rapidly.
Fair enough.
So the wounds mechanic got changed drastically. I think that was actually the thing I needed to talk about the most. So
okay.
I'm going to segue that in right now really quickly. So now there's only 3 types of wounds. There's dizzy, which means you get +1 difficulty on rolls. Battered, which means you get -1 action per turn. And bleeding, at the start of your turn, you lose 1 HP. So every time you take a wound, you choose out of the ones you don't already have. So your first wound, you get to choose out of 3. The second wound is 2, and the last one you get all 3. But when you take your 4th wound, you become defeated. And when you become defeated, you roll a d6, and based on the results, you get to have the fun of figuring out if you died or not. So on a 1 to 4, you tactically retreat. You're on the sidelines or take shelter by an ally. Basically, it's like you just can't participate into the fight. It's kind of like your allies are going to try really hard to cover you, so you don't become like a part. You're just out of the battle. And you gain the ability called Power of Friendship. So, you know, when you, yeah, super fun. And also when somebody removes a wound, like someone chooses to use one of their potions, something like that, you're returned to the battlefield to a free adjacent space next to an ally that healed you. So, you know, as long as you're tactically retreated, any ally can pop with any ability to restore wounds, can just bring you back, and it just will narratively say that they ran over to you, or you ran over to them and they were able to help you back out or patch you up or whatever, right?
Okay. And then while you're out, you get this Power of Friendship ability, which you can use to give someone an accuracy on a roll or a save.
Yes, which is like super duper stealing from
Sentinels.
Sentinels of the Multiverse. Yeah. I love Sentinels where like the chips are down and you're just like, oh man, I'm defeated, but my friends are still here and I could cheer them on or inspire them. So yeah, the Power of Friendship is super cool. So, you know, you can turn, even like I said, even if you're going down, I just kind of hate it when you're unconscious in Pathfinder or D&D and you're just like, oh man, I spent a couple hours or a couple rounds or like even like real world hours depending on how long the fight is or how serious it is doing nothing, which sucks.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a good chance, a little bit more than, it's, you know, 60% chance of you still being able to help out in some way. But okay, on a 5, you're knocked out. So, you know, you are unconscious but still alive. Your allies can pick you up while they can use an action to pick you up and carry you, but they reduce any movement by half when you're moving. And then, you know, you can be removed. You can remove the wounds and you get to return back to the battlefield. You know, if a ally heals you or something like that. And optionally, it's up to the GM and what kind of game they're playing. If you are struck with an attack while you're unconscious, you get dead. And which is the number 6 option, which is like if you roll a 6 on the die, you are dead. You succumb to your wounds and your injuries, and you just die. Optionally, the GM can just choose to result to be knocked out instead. So given that kind of flexibility, just to kind of like, depending on what kind of game your GM wants to run or the players want to be a part of, if you feel like it's not a serious moment and you don't need to die, then you don't have to die, right? But yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't know about the changes to how wounds works. That's why I was like super confused.
Yeah. So booting back to, I guess, the NPCs. Now we've cleared that up. I don't know. I think that's cool. I don't know, Kel, what's your thoughts on? I'm
now that because what I was thinking before, right? Because before it was like you have your separate bars for each ability, and then once those go down, like the ability gets reduced by 1. So when I'm looking at Overwhelm, and it was like you get reduced by 1 if you succeed, but otherwise you just get normal damage. It was like, well, I mean, that doesn't sound great. But now, this makes more sense now, because again, you have the effect of making that particular type of ability less effective for the rest of combat until you're able to fix it, which is something I thought was interesting. And now that just works better with like this particular ability.
Yeah, and your wounds stay, right? So if you are bleeding before, when you start combat again, you continue to bleed.
Right.
Right? Like your wounds literally haven't healed or been properly attended to, or you reopen them or whatever because of the strenuousness of actually doing the combat or the violence. But okay, so back to the example.
Yeah, the fire pheasant. I see. So we've got a couple more abilities here that came from like the sorcerer and then pyromancer subtype. Is there any other specific thing you wanted to cover, just for, because I just wanted to get into like how the enemies are made. Was there another specific thing you wanted to cover for this in the last couple minutes of the episode?
Yeah, so I wanted to go over kind of like there's no rules. So if you wanted to have like a beast base and like have like some more of a humanoid shape, or even just like have it be like a monster, or like like have a humanoid be a monster, or just whatever, then yeah, just whatever abilities that you want to craft to make your specific monster, then you just do it. I'm actually always adding stuff and making more things happen in the game, so I really want to expand the list and just kind of make it easy for GMs to because you fight like 1,000 goblins all the time, right?
Right.
And this way you can make it really easy to make like every single. You can take a base humanoid template, call it a goblin, and just slap like an assassin on it, and this is the assassin goblin, right? His name is Stabs, and he stabs you. That's what the assassin goblin does. So it's super easy. But as well as there's another layer to challenges. So there's the boss, which is where you take a major, which is 2 templates and a base, and basically based on the base. So depending on the base, you get a bunch of options to add like another template on top, which is the boss template. And I kind of want to go over one super duper quickly, which is like the sword sage. And the idea for the sword sage is that this is like the master of masters of the art of slashing, right? Of doing the violence. So so he gets the ability called boss actions, which means they happen like outside of their turn. So like it usually means like at the end of the turn or in reaction to something, but it's not a reaction. It's just kind of like an extra ability that they get to do. So based on the round, they get like a specific attack. Like in round 1, it's called Whirlwind Embrace, Love's Rending Wind. It summons a bunch of whirlwinds that block line of sight, throw you around, and it's just because they're super good at the sword. While all the way up to like round 5, if the fight drags on, it kind of puts the pressure on the players. So every single round, they get to do a super cool, awesome attack that gets harder and harder to deal with. And, kind of pulling from like, bosses in video games, right? Like how as their health bar goes down, they get like rage mode and stuff like that, right? So, all the way up to the 5th round where it's cutting the earth and sundering the world. It's a beam 2, so it's like the entire battlefield, space area. It's a melee attack. It does super damage, and it just destroys all objects and terrain within the area. So it's like it'll cleave mountains in half because he's so good, or she's so good at the cutting, right? Which kind of makes these bosses feel like epic. And it's like anything could be a sword sage. So you could have like a ice elemental tank frame sword sage. So it's a ice dude with a tank and artillery gun, but also he is the best at the swords, and the players just have to deal with that, whatever that means.
Cool. Yeah, okay, I definitely want to get into more of the enemy NPC stuff, but I don't know if we have time this week.
Yeah.
Swear.
So maybe in the future we'll focus on the NPC section of the players got a lot of love. They got like 3 episodes, so maybe you can go and mess around in this little sandbox and create some fun enemies. I think that'll be pretty fun.
Yeah, I think it would be fun to have like an episode where we just come in with like a creature idea and then see how we can build something like that.
Yeah, for sure. And there's also the bosses get domain abilities, so it means that like they just apply battlefield effects, and they don't care what you have to say about it. So, yeah.
Okay.
Very cool.
All right. So yeah, if you guys want to hear more about that, how to build NPCs and what the NPCs can do, or other character classes, or just more mechanical stuff, we're definitely going to be talking about this game a lot more in the future. If you have any specific questions, be sure to comment them below, or to check out the document. It's going to be links below. It's going to be one of the first links probably, so just check it out, give it a read through, give it a test play if you want, and let us know how it goes. Or just try making a character and see how that goes, like the basic thing.
Yeah, I would love to hear people's ideas for characters, as well as like if you want to try making an NPC, let me know if you think something's super broken or not. This has obviously not been playtested to its fullest potential and definitely not balanced. So
yeah, it's largely like mechanical stuff. So if there's anything you think that needs to be added, just let us know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, all the other typical YouTube stuff. If you like the video, please like the video. Subscribe if you want to see more stuff from us, including gaming streams, such as Gotham Knights and Skyrim and Mass Effect 3 currently. We'll be making plans in the near future to figure out what's going to be replacing Gotham Knights on Thursday once that's finished. So yeah, I've got some ideas, and there'll be some polls either on Twitter or on YouTube, or both. Additionally, I want to give some shout outs to people, including all the Lancer third-party content creators we've got linked below. Definitely check out the In Golden Flame if you've signed up for the In Golden Flame Kickstarter. There were some art updates recently that were pretty sweet, so definitely check those out. As well, I want to shout out to the Untold Stories Project channel, where I'm at on Tuesdays and Wednesdays playing in various games, including the Freedom League Dark and the Gem Stars, or magical girls in a fantasy world. I was very excited to get my gem back and do my catchphrase, but it seems that all of our gems have gotten mixed up.
Classic. I have this feeling that it's every time you play like any of the series, it's always like somebody either body hops or everyone's powers get switched over. It's just like, you always walk in someone else's shoes for a while.
Yeah. We thought like our GM mentioned it was going to be like a 1-episode thing, and I was like, I've been body swapped before. This isn't going to be 1 episode. We're going to have too much fun with this, and it's going to take too long. So yeah, I've gone from being the big punchy damage person to having the healing abilities.
Obviously, perfect Calvin maneuver.
I mean,
Calvin's final form, mom.
It was completely random too, but somehow
the dice never lie. They know exactly what they're doing.
Indeed. But yeah, it was fun to watch someone else do my big abilities, because I have a bunch of area attacks that I rarely get to do because they also affect my allies, and the ranges are pretty big. So just sitting back and letting other people do my thing was pretty fun.
Nice. Maybe we should do like what kind of like player are you in the party, or party roles, but instead of it being like tank or whatever, it's like mom and like broodmaster or like edgelord or something, right? Like the orphan, like. We should do that. That'd be pretty good.
Yeah. In the comments, give us some like alternate party role types. But yeah, that's all I've got for now. Ramon, anything else you want to say before we head on out of here?
Nope. Go check out Grand Saga and let me know, because I am desperate for feedback.
Indeed.
All right, well, for all of our large cannon-wielding GMs and players out there, just remember to keep on winning with dice, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.